hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism actually have quite a bit in common. They have quite a bit in common. But let's talk about the thyroid first. What is it? It's a gland. It's located here. It communicates with the brain to help with mainly metabolism and body temperature. So hypothyroidism is the most common, though hyperthyroidism is harder to detect. It's harder to catch than hypo. So hypothyroidism can be caused by a number of different things. And hypothyroid is when the metabolism is lower, the body temperature is lower, so we're more likely to be cold, or maybe we're having hot flashes still, but that once we get cold, we can't warm back up again. When the thyroid is low, the metabolism just gets a little sluggish. So we may have trouble shedding weight, or we may not. We might be quite slender and still have hypothyroidism, low functioning. Our mental clarity is not going to be there though. We may have we just have a hard time keeping up with ourselves, keeping up with life. And so we find that our fun and leisure time is being replaced with rest and sleep time. Also, that because our mental processes maybe aren't as sharp as they used to be, it might take a little longer to get our work done. And so some of our leisure time is then replaced with work time or chores. And then what we find ourselves doing is just responsibility, sleep, responsibilities, sleep, responsibilities, sleep. And we start to get frustrated. That frustration often looks like anxiety, or maybe even a bit of depression, the blues. So there's lots of reasons, and that's why blood tests are so helpful. I love doing blood tests. I really love running blood tests. It just helps me so much in being confident in the recommendations I'm making, that they're correct and that I'm not missing something. So there's nutrients, there's vitamins, there's minerals that affect thyroid function. Nutrient deficiencies absolutely have a role to play in thyroid dysfunctions, both hypo and hyper. And there's our first similarity: mineral deficiencies and some vitamin deficiencies. So we can talk about that in the visit. Now with hypothyroidism, there's two main kinds, at least in the medical world. So we're going to tackle this from a conventional medicine point of view, where it's simply hypo, where your TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, is elevated. Okay, so in hypothyroidism, TSH is elevated. And that's because TSH is the stimulator of the thyroid. And it goes in and it says, hey, keep up, try and keep up, try and keep up. And if it's high, imagine that that's your body kind of yelling at the thyroid, hey, let's go, come on. You're not keeping up, let's go. And a lot of the body's vitality and energy is going towards trying to get the thyroid to be able to be where it needs to be. Okay, so that's TSH. And that's plain old hypothyroidism. Now, your thyroid hormones are your T3 and your T4. Okay, T3, T4, those are the active thyroid hormones. Those are the things that make our metabolism work and make our body temperature and all those other things. There's also an autoimmune condition of the thyroid causing hypothyroidism, and that's called Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Now, thyroiditis might happen slowly, gradually, where you don't notice a flare, or the throat might get hot, like like there's something blocking it suddenly, that you might feel kind of hypercaffeinated and racy, almost anxiety with a lot of heat coming out. You feel inflamed. Well, if that happens, get to your doctor. That's a case of inflammation of the thyroid gland, and it needs to be looked at fairly urgently. But generally speaking, with Hashimoto's, at least for my Hashimoto's, how it happened with me and how it happened with other people that I speak to about it, we didn't get that flare, or at least we didn't notice it. Maybe we were too busy. Maybe we thought it was just a panic attack. When we have Hashimoto's, there are two other lab tests that are important to diagnose that. Number one is anti-thyroid peroxidase. anti-TPO. The other one is antithyroglobulin, anti-TG. All right, so stay with me. Antithyroperoxidase and antithyroglobulin. The thyroperoxidase is an enzyme, which means that it breaks things down. It cuts things apart so it can be made into other things. So what it does is it helps get the inactive thyroid hormone made into the active thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. Okay, that's what TPO does. It's an enzyme. So try thyroglobulin. Okay, thyroglobulin is a protein that has to do with the building of the T3 and the T4 as well. It's proteins, just slightly different. Similar thing though, you want to check them both, or I like to check them both. Antithyroglobulin, anti-TPO. So those are antibodies against that enzyme and that protein. Okay, antibodies against that enzyme and that protein. Antibodies are from the immune system. So the immune system has accidentally launched an attack onto thyroid function. Thyroid function didn't attack the gland itself. The immune system accidentally thought, "Ooh, look at that thyroperoxidase enzyme. That's a bad guy. I'm gonna make sure that we protect the body against that thyroperoxidase enzyme. I'm gonna build up anti-thyroperoxidase enzyme, basically a police force that's specific for that enzyme. And every time we see that enzyme around, my police force is going in, and we're gonna just get rid of it." And so that's what autoimmunity is. It's a mistake in the immune system. It's misguided protection. Same thing with thyroglobulin. Oh, the immune system says, "Look at this thyroglobulin protein. That doesn't look very. I'm gonna get a police force for that too." And so another division of police force being our immune system, goes in, and every time thyroglobulin, he sees thyroglobulin, wipes it out. So it's sort of a race between like, okay, how much enzyme can we produce? Or how much protein can we produce compared to how much antibody can we produce? And can you imagine all that energy that's going into like, we gotta make more of this, we gotta make more of this, we gotta make more, and it's just this battle between the two. But that's autoimmunity. That's a great definition of autoimmunity. The body battling with itself. Yeah. So that is autoimmune hypothyroidism. Autoimmune hyperthyroidism, what's that? Well, that's more confusing, to be honest. That's more confusing. Because I see elevated anti-TPO and anti-TG in hyperthyroidism. And we're not supposed to see that in hyper, but we do. So that's why it gets confusing. I don't quite understand it. But I always test anyway, regardless if it's hypo or hyper. So that's the next similarity between the two thyroid conditions. Now, Graves' disease is the autoimmune version of hyperthyroidism. Now, I don't know if it's just me that doesn't understand hyperthyroidism as much as I do hypo, or whether or not there's just not enough information out there about hyper. I do think that I think hyperthyroid is just not as well understood in the literature, in the medical world, as the hypo is. So I can't give you a whole big story about the hyperthyroidism. Suffice it to say that sometimes the autoimmune markers are elevated, but in hyperthyroidism, T3 and T4, which we blood test for, are active hormones. T3 and T4 are elevated, whereas in hypo, they're low. Okay? So in hyperthyroidism, is the TH high or low? It's low, right? Because the stimulator of the thyroid is not going to have to shout at that thyroid. If it's hyper and it's pumping out too much thyroid hormone and the TSH is going to be like really quiet, right? It's going to be very low. So the signs and symptoms of hyperthyroidism are sort of like this, again, hypercaffeinated feeling, just like you get in a thyroid flare, but that's different, okay? Hypo, you're chilly, you're sluggish, can't keep up with yourself, mental clarity's low, just slow. Everything's just kind of like slow inside of you. That's what it feels like. Hyper is more like a internal spinning. It's an oscillation and it just keeps going and you get tired. So you look wound up and your face is tense and this is probably a little thin. You've lost some weight here. And your face has like a sweaty kind of sheen to it. And you feel hypercaffeinated, but you feel really tired too on the inside. So it's sort of like a surface fatigue with this internal spinning. And the mental clarity is a little bit different. It's still not there. We're not sharp when we're in a hyperthyroid flare, but the mind kind of is just more like it can't focus very well. And we just kind of give up trying. We just get tired and frustrated, and then we start investigating the problem. So the next similarity between hyper and hypothyroidism is food sensitivities, believe it or not. Food sensitivities. Yep, food sensitivities. I see that a lot, and I do test for food sensitivities with a blood test, an immune system blood test. It's called the IgG, food sensitivity test. I do find it helpful. Literature is conflicted on that, and I will fully admit that, but I do find it helpful. Not the be-all, end-all of anything by any means, but when we find a food sensitivity and we're able to correct it, I find with my patients the thyroid is much easier to manage once the food sensitivity has been discovered and dealt with. So I think that's all I have to say about the thyroid today. Actually, no, that's not all I have to say about the thyroid today. I want to address iodine because there's information on the internet about iodine. Doesn't mean it's not correct. Some of it is, some of it isn't. Just be really careful. Be really careful with iodine. Don't just take it on your own. This is complicated stuff. It's hard to understand. Our experts don't understand it as well as they would like. We're still researching it and understanding it. So go to a medical doctor or a naturopathic doctor who knows about the iodine and the thyroid and what supportive therapies need to happen there to make sure that it's done safely. And it's not bad medicine, it just needs to be done right. You'll see some stuff on the internet about toxins too, solvents, endocrine disruptors. If you've never heard that term before, endocrine disruptors. I might do a video on that at some point. Endocrine disruptors, it's a great big topic. And yes, it's relevant to the thyroid. Yes, we're learning it's relevant to the thyroid. So we can talk about that more in a visit if you're local. If not, find a local ND around you and have a wonderful day. See you soon.